What do you mean you don't have hot sauce? This is Texas. We put Tabasco on cornflakes. You can play it safe if you want to, but you gotta risk it to get that biscuit. When it comes to business, you gotta look out for the cookout. That's how we do it in Texas. What do you mean my accent is too southern? Well, we're fixing to get it on Solve for X. Welcome to Solve for X, the podcast where curiosity meets collaboration. I'm Dr. Rick Fernandez, your host on this journey into the heart of education and innovation. Welcome back to Solve for X, where we're solving for K-12's most difficult challenges. I am your host, Dr. Rick Fernandez, and I have a special guest all the way from Massachusetts, and I'd like to think he's a Red Sox and Celtics fan, but I'll save that for later. Torrance Lewis, Assistant Superintendent in Lincoln Public Schools. Thank you so much for joining the show.
Thank you for having me.
So you do have a unique a career path, which we talked about a little bit off air last time we chatted. And if you wouldn't mind sharing that, because I think this is a great time for both educators and non-educators to understand there's many paths to a career, and if your heart's into helping students, there's really no limits at this day and age. So please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Well, I don't hope it's exciting, but we'll see about that. So I can and let me know if I can go on forever. So let me know what if you want to kind of change directions. So I'm in Massachusetts, like you said, and I'm originally from Atlanta. I'm from Georgia, born and raised. Went there for college and first grad school. And when I entered undergrad, I went to Georgia Tech for undergrad. I ended up being an international affairs major. If you'd asked me, I guess roughly 30 years ago, would I have been an educator or teacher? I would have said no, probably not. But things changed in your early 20s. And what changed for me was actually, I think, 31 years ago. I worked at a camp in the Catskill Mountains. And I went to the Catskill Mountains in New York just because I wanted to be in the woods for the summer. And it wasn't because I was wanted to work with kids. I was the youngest. I was the one that people took care of me and things like that. But when I worked at that camp at age 19, I liked it, first of all, and I saw that I was good at it. So that kind of put the education bug in my ear, or in my head, I should say. And then over time, I eventually decided to pivot away from, I guess, financial management. And I went to grad school at Emory. And so I studied upper elementary and middle level learning, with also a focus on urban and multicultural education as well, and having a background in national affairs. And so I started my career in upper elementary. And that was in Georgia, in the Atlanta area, as a schools educator. Then after that, because of my, I had this interesting mix of like wanderlust, but also stability in my international affairs background, I ended up seeking some jobs overseas in international schools. So I ended up, but in my fourth year of teaching, I went to Brazil and, to teach there in International School of Brasilia. The American School of Brasilia. I was there for 4 years. Thought about maybe leaving education, maybe going to education policy. So I tried a few things, ended up in Massachusetts, but I decided to go back in education. So I started working here in Massachusetts in middle school. And then I went back to Brazil and taught grade 5 down there, international school. And then during this time, I also got a background in leadership, and I became assistant principal, eventually a principal. And now I'm assistant superintendent in Massachusetts. So that's it in a nutshell. I can go on a little longer, but that's it. That's the pathway.
Okay, there's a lot to unpack there. So, okay, first of all, the Catskill Mountains. I got to know, like, what kind of skills are you? Are you like you could do some surviving, or are you making fire? Like, what is your skill level now?
It was no skills. It's this Catskill Mountains. It was more like they came down to they were recruiting down south. This camp I worked at. There's a network of long-term sleepaway camps in the Catskill Mountains of Poconos. A lot of them are Jewish families who live like Long Island, New Jersey, who send their kids there for a full 7 weeks. So the camp I worked at like having diverse counselors from all over the place. There'd be a lot of people from Europe, a lot from the New York tri-state region, and also
Right.
they went down south. And so I just happened to be in the summer job office or something like that. And my campus, I saw a small little sign that says, "Do you want to go work in the Catskill Mountains in the woods?" And like I said earlier, I just wanted to be away. I wanted to be in nature. I'm not a big wilderness person, so that's why I went for it. And then I didn't know at that time it took me on a different path that I didn't even know I was going to go on. Back in 1995.
That's pretty awesome. So, most people, and I would even generalize and say educators, not the most risk tolerant of folks, right? We're typically more of like, we're kind of risk averse in a lot of ways. So, very interesting that you're like, all right, I've never done this, and I probably need to, so I'm gonna go do it. Um, the other question I have to ask. So, with a finance background, how long did it take you, like working in education? But oh man, whew, I don't know if I'm ever going to be a millionaire with this track. I mean, I may have to rethink what I got going on here. Like, did it hit you hard, like going from the finance world to like realizing, all right, this is kind of a different set of financial circumstances I'm probably going to be working with.
So, my background was in pure finance. My major was international affairs. And so I took a lot of class work in economics, international policy, international economics, and also management. And so one of the first jobs I got out of undergrad, this is the late 90s when the economy was booming and we getting a job in Delaware. So my background was more management, that type. So it ended up being in financial management. A good job. But to kind of say it, the truth, my heart wasn't in it. I couldn't see, I actually saw it's interesting you say that about, like, people wanting stability. I actually saw, like, just a very, basic path going forward. I know it's not like that, but I wasn't excited about the next 10 years. And what's attracted me to education, and a lot of people aren't like this, but what attracted me to education is that you can go on different many pathways. If you like it's something small, like you can be teaching 4th grade for a while and be like, okay, I want to try something different. So you go teach 6th grade. Or, hey, I've been teaching social studies for a long time. I want to teach English or math, something like that. So that to me is how I've always saw it. And I've kind of worked my career that way. That's why I see the benefits of education. A lot of people think it's very static, but it doesn't have to be. And one of my friends, she kind of said, I didn't see it this way. She said, like, it's kind of like I had like a private sector career, but within a public sector mostly. So it can be done. I mean, I always feel like I've kind of like always moved forward. It hasn't been like a steps back or anything. So I've always saw education as very many pathways and many options. But not everyone sees it that way.
No, no, I couldn't agree more. I think if you would ask me 5 years ago before I went into the private sector, I would have been like, oh, I'm not seeing that, or not my experience. But now I know exactly what you're talking about because I'm still immersed in K-12. I'm still getting to do all the things I love to do, working in schools, working with superintendents, working on the tech side of the house as well. And there are a lot of different routes that I would say most educators might not be aware of. So I think you make a valid point. But I do think you're a bit of an anomaly. Like I said, a little bit of a risk averse nature for the most part. And I'm of course generalizing, but we need some more folks that are willing to take some risks because of just the state of public education as a whole.
Yeah.
And I want to get your take on artificial intelligence, but before I do that, I've got to ask you some comparisons from your time in Brazil and how the business of school is done there versus obviously working in the states. Kind of, can you compare and contrast just a little bit for the audience?
Yeah, I can do that. I can break it down probably right now about 3 areas. And then um and then we can kind of talk more about that. So one thing is interesting you say that because I went overseas to teach in national schools back in 2003. That was the first time I went. And so to be clear, these are they're not Department of Defense schools, but there's a network of international schools, usually American based or British based or international baccalaureate based, that educate the children of diplomats or non NGO or maybe a businessman who likes Coca-Cola, but you're Sao Paulo, Brazil. And then depending on the country, you may also have a small or a large host national population, people who live in the country but send their kids to the international or American school. And so that's the context right there. And so in some ways, even though they're international schools, if they're tied to an embassy, they are really kind of like the public school option for expats in that country. But
Yeah.
for people in that host country, it may be like, ooh, I'm going. It's like in the Boston, we have a Boston International School. You're like choosing to send your child there if you live in that town or that city. So when I went to Brazil, it was Brasilia, the capital. The first thing I noticed in terms of teaching was because people ask you the same question when I got back to Georgia for Christmas to visit. They're like, "So what do you find so different?" And the first thing I said was that kids are kids, and I really saw the the universal, kids are kids no matter where they
Yeah.
are. Like one thing is that I've taught in Georgia, I've taught in urban schools, suburban, I've taught in Brazil, I've taught in Massachusetts, but I've been the same black male teacher raised in Atlanta, raised with Southern and Black culture wherever I've went. I didn't change, for I was myself. And how I taught my class in Atlanta, for example, at that point, worked very well in Brazil and vice versa. Kids need And what I saw is that kids need authentic humans. They just need people
Yeah.
who understand them, they know the developmental level. And what it is, even if a child's learning a new language, kids learn languages fast and they pick up on what's what's typical in 11-year olds, and things like that. They'll connect in ways that sometimes we adults forget what we were like at that age. So that's where I saw it first. Um, in terms of differences, I would say you get like the basic differences where a lot of international schools, and I'm not talking about Department of Defense schools. That Department of Defense are with the U.S. military, and they're usually on a base, in Iceland or something like that. But in international schools, you may not, because they're technically not part of the public system, you're not required to take children with a learning disability or an IEP. Uh, and parents, or families when they go to these schools have to be upfront about that. A school may be able to support them, but they don't have to. They may not have the program. So that's something that's different right there. To where, inadvertently, it led to the second part of my career where we focus a lot. I'm going aside a little bit, but we'll come back to
No, go
this.
ahead.
We focus a lot like on we talk about IEPs and your disability being an IEP. And, in terms of MTSS and RTI intervention, yeah, the group of kids, depending on population, 15 to 20%, who don't have a disability, but who struggle. They may struggle a lot or a little bit different areas. And that's been the niche, an emerging niche, or not niche, a foundation part of education for the last, like, say, 25 years. So when I worked at international school at first, I saw, because we didn't have, many students in IEP, we had students who struggle. And we didn't have anything does it for them. So it forced me to start thinking about, what kind of support can you give children who don't have disability, but they need reinforcement in this area. They need to be retaught. There was a skill gap somewhere. Thinking about that for the few years several years I was there. Later on, I ended up getting a job in Massachusetts, my teaching job here, where I became an interventionist. And I based it on my my background on trying to kind of formulate some kind of intervention system in a school that did not have that before. And so that's kind of like
Yeah.
my next step in my career right there. So
Okay. Okay. So kind of out of necessity, you saw a need and there wasn't anything, so you had to build it and kind of test it and pilot it and tweak it
yeah,
based on what your kids. Okay. No,
yeah,
that's awesome. It's what teachers do. I think a lot of times every day is like trying to figure out that heard so much about personalized learning and a lot of it with this just push of artificial intelligence. So the thought is that we're getting closer to what personalized learning actually would look like in practice, right? I don't think that we're there yet, but I think we're getting closer because we can now adjust in real time. Can we do it across all the variables? I don't think so yet, but it's getting closer. And so I do want to get your take artificial intelligence and just in Massachusetts, not only your district, but maybe your colleagues across the state. How are y'all engaging with it? Is it more of a pullback and let's figure out the guardrails, or is it more of a hey, we've got to do this because our kids need the skills? Kind of where do y'all sit I'm putting you on the spot, making you speak for the
okay.
public ed in Massachusetts, but
All
just from
Massachusetts,
your
yeah,
experience,
yeah.
yeah,
So I can talk about this. Is let me know if you wanted me to kind of like turn off the faucet a little bit. So, first I'll start off with I'm gonna ask you a question. You want the
sure.
honest answer or a political answer?
No, I want the whatever. Well, I
I'll
want you
be
to keep your
honest.
job. So
This won't
person,
be a joke. I'll give you the honest answer. Honestly,
okay,
yeah. So I'm going to start off with my view, and then I'm going to talk about what our district is doing, and then what I've kind of started hearing in other districts. So I'm going to go straight to the front door. I'll be honest with you. In terms of AI and education in schools and kids, I'm basically almost like nothing's absolute. I'm like a big old X, and let me tell you why. I'm gonna try to, this is gonna be pretty quick when I say this part, but we've experienced this for the last what years, 15, 20 years with technology in schools, and we saw technology in schools, technology in society, and we're now seeing how we've gone down this path like too far, and now we're kind of saying, what have we done? You know, the attention span, our kids, the reading stamina is not there. They're not getting the tactile skills that they need and things like that. So, and I remember being like an early mid-career teacher, and you had some colleagues who just go down. I call them those tech boys, those kind of tech boys who just really like, yeah, yeah, Prezi, PowerPoint, tech, tech, tech. Um, and back then, especially around 2010, it was exciting. It looked cool and stuff like that. So that's a way of kind of jazzing things up. But what were we really doing authentic things that kids need? And we have to remember, like I said earlier, that children are young humans. They're developing from 0 up through age 20, 18, 25, depending on who you are. They're developing. So there's human skills we're supposed to be developing with that. That is what school's about. That's why we have curriculum. That's why we have instruction. And that's why I feel as educators, we earn our paycheck by our knowledge of child and young adolescent development. The content is important and curriculum is important, but that we really, our expertise is knowing how children and young adolescents develop. And I think that's gonna be the foundation of what we do. So coming back to AI, I feel like we went down this road. Our technology, so and how I see it is that AI is not it's not a new thing. It's the most recent thing. And so the good thing is how I'm gonna be optimist right now is that we know now to be more careful. That the first question is, are we gonna be careful about this? We know how we went too far in that on other technology. What are we gonna do about AI? I think that we need to, kids need to learn, like, about how to read, have reading stamina, how to grapple with math. You're touching paper, you're touching blocks, you're writing it down, you're learning how to do manuscript, learn how to do cursive. And then when you get an older teenager or adult, you could decide what you want to do. But what it is, if you don't give kids the time to develop what I call those human skills, socially, tactile, emotionally, curriculum, then we're hurting them as adults. And our job is we're trying to make full citizens. So that's why I see AI as like, if you think about it, where would it be useful for a child to have AI? I want them to think themselves, like, but that it's different. Adults, is a different thing though. Hopefully you have, if you've had a good education, you had, experience, you train. So AI can be a tool to make things more efficient, almost like getting a personal assistant sometimes. But you're already an adult, you have experience, so you're using it as a tool to make your life or your job more efficient in some kind of way. So that's how I see they're different things. Instead of just being
Okay.
like when someone says like you mentioned personalized learning, I'm like my my antenna went up. I'm like, what? No, humans need humans. Young humans need young humans. They need older humans to guide them in their learning and things like that. I can imagine the idea of a child just being on an AI type screen and the interaction is AI. That's not human. What are we doing at that point? I know we watch a lot of Star Trek and Star Wars and stuff like that, but that's a different different universe. So that's my view in a nutshell. In terms of our district, I would say I've been working closely with our director of education operations and technology, and one of our instructional technology specialists. We actually went to a conference. I think I mentioned to you in our private conversation. I think
Yep.
it's called COSIN, and
Yep.
it was a good conference because it wasn't about like it didn't feel like you're out at some kind of TED talk, like trying to jazz up AI. It was very kind of like they approached it from like a societal issue. How are we going to handle it? And it's not going anywhere. What are we going to do to protect children, and help educators help children with AI? So
Yeah.
that's how we're approaching it. Now and it was refreshing for me to see that it wasn't all about like AI can do this, you can do this, you don't need this. It was like no, it was like okay, whoa, what does this mean? And so it was great because you got to look at it almost like from 3 to 5 different angles of AI. How I see it is you have the community, parents, who read some kind of like some news bulletin, news flash, like AI is gonna do this. And they'll come like you make an email like, I'm worried about AI. 'Cause they saw some like one podcast or one documentary or something like that. So what you do as a district is making sure that your messaging and communication with parents is upfront, whatever else. For kids, I already explained that. I think kids, we got to make sure their AI is not taken away from their development, that it's not substituting human skills they develop. That's the other one with kids. With teachers, I think we have to think about it I think in three different ways, right? One is this is good. How can AI make their job, their professional adult, how can it make them more efficient and easier? Where and not like doing the thinking for you, but making like a task that should take you longer it can be faster. That's great. You teach them those tools to make their job faster. The second one is I think how to teach kids about the perils of AI and what AI is, right? So you're not just kind of I'm almost like being neutral about something is almost as worse. Is just letting kids just be caught in the wind and whatever else. So they need adults in their life to help them teach them about the perils of AI, how AI could be useful when they're adult, things like that. So give them that knowledge. And I think a third one, this is a big deal, is that we have to teach teachers how to be real time, have real time ethics about AI. And what I mean by that, because AI and technology is constantly changing, you don't know what kind of issues and what kind of questions our kids are going to ask. But we need to train adults to be ready in terms of technology, AI, anything that's going to be a dilemma in their class. They don't have time to be like, okay, stop right there. Let me go look at the AI manual and like, oh, let me respond to you this way. No, you need to know how, in terms of child development and the problems of AI and the benefits of AI, how can you help children in real time moments where you don't have time to go like a full day to go ask someone else and come back and address the situation. So that's how I
Gotcha.
see it, those things.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Let me throw some pushback at you.
Okay. All right.
Okay, from the first point, right? So, if we're, I would agree, we threw a lot of tech at teachers and students to varying degrees of success, right? And a lot of it was the tool, not the outcome. I would agree 100%. Guilty as charged as a principal, as an assistant superintendent. I know I got to own some of that somewhere down the road. But I think there could be an argument made like, okay, so we've had adults for most of the time, shepherding kids, working through curriculum, all of the things that your teachers would do without technology. And I would argue it's been pretty stagnant for quite some time in terms of the outcomes that we get for students as a whole. Now, I know Massachusetts does it better. I think you guys are top in the nation, as a matter of fact. But I think that, again, that is more of the anomaly than the rule. I think that there's been a lot of just stuck and not exploring all the different avenues because y- most teachers teach how they were instructed. Most coaches coach a sport how they were coached, and for whatever reason, because we definitely know that there's better ways to do things, but it's like anything else. If it doesn't become a habit in practice, then it's just some wasted PD, or there's no urgency to understand, adopt, and change. Then you get what you get, where you get, yeah, some people take it, and but the rest just kind of do what they've always done. Do we have the ability? This kind of hits all three of them. Do we have the ability as adults to be self-directed learners enough to take this thing that's exploded like nothing else, right? And that is 100% gonna affect. If you have a kid in high school now, I don't know that they can abstain and not understand how this is going to work, because it's going to totally affect how they do business, how they their careers, all of those things. Do the adults have the capacity to be self-directed learners enough to do some of those things where they can catch up and be the guides that students need, right? And I'm not even talking about the curriculum, right? I've got a whole nother belief on, all right, this should be a great kind of catalyst to change as instruction like we're currently doing it. Is that ever really been the best? I would say no.
Right.
But just from a capacity level, because I would guess that you're a little bit different in terms. So you go do something that you haven't done before, or you taking on a career step that was out of the box. But I'm gonna guess that you had a lot of self-directed learning that you just did, or you found, or you sought out. And I don't know that that's the norm. I feel like I'm kind of the same mindset. Like when I found something that I don't know how to solve, and I get excited because then I want to go find
Yeah.
who knows about this, or where can I find the resources to understand it. So I don't know. I question our ability as adults to be able to change enough, tweak enough, and then put into practice the things that we need to kind of deliver the points that you're making.
Okay, I can respond. Yeah, this I like this a lot. So I'm gonna respond to the self-directed part at first.
Okay.
I would say, overall, no, we can't just depend on teaching professionals to be hopefully be self-directed enough to learn about AI and be that like AI real term response person and know all this. You will have some teachers who are like that, but just like
Yeah.
anything else in initiative, we can't depend on a hope. You know what I'm saying? And so like when I talk about what we're doing as a district, it's going to be also, it means like we're doing professional development around it as well. So we went to the conference in January. We're kind of lucky this upcoming year that we're also trying to pilot like some literacy and math. We started a new literacy curriculum. We're gonna be piloting math. So we have room in this coming year to do some more AI focused professional development. I think that's key. Like I wouldn't be saying all this stuff where we need to be unless you're going to support teachers in doing it. You got to put the
Yeah.
money where your mouth is. Like it's almost like you've been a principal, AP as in central office positions. Is that like when I would create a schedule, I was like, how can I require or basically urge the teacher to do something if I'm not going to have something in their time, their schedule to do it. So like,
Yeah.
I've seen some schools where they're like, we want teachers to collaborate and talk about kids more. I'm like, okay, where they looking at the schedule? Where are they going to do that? So to AI, I think it means you do have to have comprehensive professional development about it. And I'm excited because summertime is the time to plan. We're in the middle of that planning right now. Um, so that's how I see it. And I think it's not just AI. It's also like I was actually working with our instructional coaches and I was explaining to them because one of the area they had to work on was seeing that everyone is not going to approach learning the same way. So they're very curious. They're self starters. I'm all like, you're going to get a group of people who are just like you. Then you have some who are kind of like, oh, if it's in front of me, I'll read it. Some people
Yeah.
are not going to really do anything, but if you give them guidelines or parameters and like this is your job, they will do it. So we have to approach things in that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
So like and you can't expect everyone's gonna come there being like, hey, I read a book last night and about AI. It's like a lot of people won't do that. But you as a district leader or school leader know what you need. So you provide that for your teachers to a point where in an adult professional way, not like spoon feeding and doing everything for them, was like giving them adult oriented PD so they can become better professionals. And that's how I look at that part. Um, in terms of the part about like the instruction about being stagnant. So my first question would be, not question, but first statement would be, is it really stagnant? Because how I look at it, teaching skills all over the board. And then depending on where you are, what your background is, or what your initiative is, some people are exposed to certain things that are more innovative, some people are not. So whether it's AI, I do think we have an issue in education where people just fall back on 1980 styles teaching, whether it's like fractions, art, or AI. And I think that's an issue regardless of whether it's technology or AI involved.
Right.
So, and an example I'm going to use with that is like middle level learning, young adolescents. You'll probably see some more literature coming out soon. How the middle grades, which is grades 5 through 9, are the least funded in our education system
Yes.
overall. It's to get the least attention. It's always kind of afterthought. And what's funny about it is not funny. It's funny, but like sad is that age range in humans is the second fastest change in growth outside of being a baby and a toddler.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so, like, when we put the least amount of focus on it, we'll focus on like grades K through 3 and 4, like, oh, and then high school, and then be like, and just forget about that 5 to 6 year period where like you go from like a child to a sub adult, So I think I'm saying that as an example because I feel like there's been really good research ongoing, but different definitive foundational research since the late 60s, early 70s about young adolescents. That actually pushed the middle school movement away from junior highs. But many places chose not to embrace it or only embrace it partially and then act like it was like a fad and not really thinking about this is what a 12-year-old needs. They're not 16 and they're not 8. So this is what they need. And I think I use that example because you might get a teacher who like say teaching an old school way, but there's literature, there's PD out there for her to improve her teaching. Did they push her to do it? Did she have initiative to learn more or whatever else? So I think that's just something in education that we just have to address is better anyway.
Yeah. I would agree with that. Regardless of the content, if the practices are still rooted in the 80s, then it really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
What you're teaching. Okay, what's your opinion on this? So, like when we talk about instruction and curriculum, like it started with everybody freaking out that everybody was cheating on everything. I was like, oh, let me just give you some. People have been cheating since like had that little mechanical pencil and will like screw the top off of it and put the paper. So
Yeah.
if kids are going to be humans are going to do all kind of things to figure out how to beat the system, right? So I don't think that is enough of a reason to pull back from AI. And the other part of it is okay, if they can cheat on anything, or you're so worried about that, right? What does that say about our ability to structure learning outcomes? So my belief is this is the prime opportunity to take the thing that we've always asked, which is provide the answer to this, right? Give us an answer for this, or take a standardized test for this, or a quiz test. And now we've always been, clamoring for, well, could we do, a scientific method and more of a project base. And so now we have that. We have what I think has gone from the answers to which now really everybody can have. But what they don't have is the specificity of the questions. So here's the answer. What are the questions that are going to get me to being able to build this out? right? And not just one question, like, that you pop into a, Gemini or Claude, but for a complex problem that we have to solve, or that I have to solve as a student, or I have to solve as a group in class, or I have to solve as a project for some type of um, outcome to prove that I understand, or I've reached, I have understand this learning objective, right? Um, so my belief is that now's the perfect time to here's the question, or the issue that we're trying to solve. Formulate the path to do that, by asking the right questions, because your tools will provide the answer. But if you ask the wrong questions, you won't solve, right? So that's kind of where I think we should be moving very quickly. And that's kind of oversimplified it, but just your thoughts around, man, we should just be looking at which questions to be asking.
Yeah, I can talk about this in a couple angles. Now, I'll start the first part you said about cheating and what's authentic work. I got a little story. So like it actually came up. I think it was at our the COSIN conference and something else. People were talking about like AI and cheating. Right. Like I said before, AI is a newest thing. So when I was in high school, I graduated high school in '94. So before internet went widespread, people still use typewriters. Our teachers, our English teachers, we had a strong English department. We could do like research, maybe sketch some things out. When we were doing our final papers, they had to be done in class. They didn't assign them and you went home and wrote it and he brought it back in. If you came in like, "I'm done, teacher," she would have looked at you like, "Where did you do this?" You know what I'm saying? So that was their way of kind of making sure, number one, the work was authentic. And it also worked if it's done in class and they would give class time and you could come before, after school and things like that. They could also be there to support you through it. So you kind
Right.
of like, having like a big brother write your paper for you. And it also taught us too how to manage time because they didn't give us unlimited time. We had to kind of figure out, get through your draft, get to your final part, and they would had the oversight. That was well before the internet, before all other technology and things like that. So so you shouldn't let new technologies change like this, give up, or whatever else. And so I sometimes when I hear about when people talk about like getting the right answer, or they'll say something like, what I'm trying to get a point I'm trying to make is like, okay, so I had some teachers before who stopped giving homework. It's like they took, some research that applied to like the kids between like 5 and 7 years old and try to apply to upper elementary and middle school, which is different. And what I saw, and it was something that I never could tackle at that moment. I think I moved to another position was, um, you also got an element that some teachers weren't assigned to homework because they felt they didn't want to do all the work required. So my first question was, why are you grading homework like it's a test? Homework is for practice. So what it is, so like homework for them became this extra job burden that should have been. It should have been like something kids go home and practice, you check it over, and you use that in class next day or whatever else. So that was the other thing. So the issue wasn't homework, yes, homework, no. It was like, how are you utilizing homework? What is homework supposed to be an extension of the work you did in class? It's not supposed to be, you can do like new material if they're doing some early research to bring to class the next day, but it's not supposed to be like, hey, go read this, learn something brand new without me. It's supposed to be them practicing the skills they learned in class. And it needs to be authentic. That's what homework's about. So that's like the true right, the foundational question. So to get back what you're saying about what's a true person education, is not about getting the right answer. If we think about it, before even AI and technology, that's how it was been. That's been a research for the last like 5 decades. It's about critical thinking skills, grappling, struggling, challenging yourself. And we have a society where we focus on the right answer, but your job as a teacher is to, in your over time, to get kids to not focus on that as much. And it can be done. I'm not saying that like I read some magic book and like, oh, this magically they did it. I've actually seen that happen. And I think that's where the learning really takes place. Are you grappling? Are you struggling? Are you getting through it? And then are you kind of then overcoming that? And I'm gonna go back to the homework example. I'm gonna give two examples. Let's get a homework example is that I felt like, when you do homework, it's almost like working out, your brain, even though brain's not a muscle, but I'm saying working out to where when you work out in the gym, break down the muscles, like break tear in the fibers, and that building back makes them stronger. So I saw homework, especially like in certain subjects, is important because it's just going home for like 5, 15 minutes, not that much time. And that kid has to somehow review the lesson they learned in class, pull it back out and struggle a little bit to kind of get through it. That's where the learning is taking place. That's the muscle being broken down and then building back. And I think that's where how homework should be utilized. Um, Also, I think there's another part about or homework. Oh, I'll never forget this. I always tell this story as well. So my last teaching gig before I became assistant principal was I taught fifth grade. I taught math, science, and social studies, but it was mostly math. And one of the biggest things, and this is while I was in Brazil, so you have like some cultures where they're more focused. It's a little bit more old school, very like this way, teaching rows. And the whole appeal of American school in another country is that you're learning school in more project based way that's different from a lot of other countries. And so a big focus of mine was asking my fifth graders, what's the why behind that? I'm not just doing like these cute little numbers on the board and carrying stuff. Like when you see a math um, problem, number story, whatever else, what's the why is that happening? Math is not some magic tree. It all has to make sense. It's a logic puzzle. And over time, they got that, and you really saw kids who probably didn't think they were as strong in math, but because they were good thinkers, their math confidences grew because it wasn't about being fast and getting the fastest answer. And
Yeah.
some who spent their whole elementary career in the fastest had to kind of come up. It's like it's math is more than that, So they had to learn that. And I'll never forget this. And I was so proud of of them. Is that I was just showing like some kind of sometimes you would do like a math and you don't want mastery, but you're just exposing the kids to it. So some kids you expose them and they may grasp onto it. Some kids may look at it and then they go back to it next year. They can remember it. And some is like, okay, that was cool, but whatever. And so I tried to do something really fast on the board and then just show some kids and I walked away. These two kids called me back, said, my last name is Lewis, like, Mr. Lewis, you can't just walk away. What's the why behind that? And they called me back to the board to kind of let them to explain to them the why. But I think it was like dividing exponents or something like that. But they wanted to know what it was. And I was so happy that they kind of like used that concept on me to make sure I'm not like writing some numbers on the board and walking away. So that's how I see that instruction piece, if that makes sense. I think grappling and struggling, not struggling like we're like suffering. I would say yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
grappling with yourself, things like that. That's what learning's about,
Yeah.
teaching to think through things.
Yeah, no doubt. That productive struggle, but man, we have lessened like kids get a B or C nowadays, and everybody jumps to the conclusion that there's a problem. It's like
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a problem.
yeah, that's not the case. But convincing parents and a convincing district, leadership to let some of that ride is hard to do, right? It's
Yeah, it
squeaky
is.
wheel type of situation. Last question for you because we sit here and talk all day. I'll keep you to the Red Sox win the World Series if we sit here and talk. From a leadership perspective, right? I feel like that there's a gap in what we provide leaders, particularly the district leadership, right? Whether it be kind of the assistant superintendent, executive director, cabinet level role, even superintendents to a large degree. How do we get a better system of, I guess, utilizing not only our tools and what have you, but making sure that if you have a group of up and comers in a cohort in your district, that by the time they either sit in your seat or in a position where they've got more influence, that they understand all of the connectivity that they have to really utilize to grow the campuses, grow the students, coach teachers. Sometimes I feel like we're not really preparing them for this role because, like all roles in education, I think it's evolved dramatically. I mean, definitely from COVID until now, but even before then, it's not just the management of stuff or the management of, what it used to be. And I don't know that we've kept pace with that. So just from your perspective, what are some of the things that either you guys are doing in the district or that you would like to see happen kind of collectively as like a way to grow our next
Yeah,
generation of leaders?
great. And so this is as good as like a last question. I could talk with this forever. I'll try to keep it to the point. Um, so I'm gonna start from like a more of the negative side of things and kind of end on a positive with all this. So one thing that I've noticed, I'm 50 years old now, and and I've gotten my career. I know I've done all the stuff, and I'm in the central office, and I'm looking at myself. I see there's not many more floors to go up, and I look around, it's kind of bleak out there. I mean, I think I may have said to you before,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's kind of like, and I'm like, I'm not sure if I was expecting some kind of like magical like Oz up here or something like that, but it's kind of bleak. What I mean by that is that like I'm worried about myself. Am I going to be further challenged? Are people just kind of like, are they really think about the big picture? Or are they just being a mouse in a maze and technicians is trying to get through it? Like you mentioned about just managing things. And the key is to be a leader, not a manager. A leader does have some management aspects of their job, but it's really about being a leader, being that CEO of your building or the district or your whatever else. And further on this a negative narrative, this negative narrative is that I'm not sure if you've seen this, but like I've been around long enough now where I see we're the only profession, and I think a certain demographic within a profession where someone will say, instead of being like, I wouldn't be good at that, I don't have the skill set for that, they'll say something like, oh, I don't want to do that. I would never want to do that. And that's a form of a defense mechanism like sour grapes, the fox and the grapes. Like putting something down when why would you say something like that? Like example, like, oh, I never want to be a principal. I'll never want to be a job. That's not a compliment. That's kind of like, what are you trying to say here? You know what I'm saying? Are you saying because someone just be a principal, they just signed up, like, hey, I'll do it. I'll take extra work and whatever else. Like, no, people should be becoming principals, assistant principals in the central office because they have they're a solid educator and an additional leadership skill set. It's not just signing out to do more PowerPoints and more tabs on your computer. It's about leading. And I think changing, changing that narrative and also calling out people who just say something. I say this because I know I have a lot of friends on professions. No one ever says like if they're not in that higher leadership position, they don't say, "Oh, I wouldn't want to do that." They were just like, "Oh, that person is my boss, my leader, whatever else." So we got to change that narrative because when someone's like, we're gonna say a teacher's doing that, who's it serving? We're all educators here. So if you're doing something that's gonna bring down the image of school leaders and district leaders, that only hurts profession and your job in the long run. What's your end game here by saying that? I want to ask them, like, by putting that down in your passive aggressive way. I'll be honest with you. What are you trying to accomplish? Because it's actually going to hurt profession. Because you want people who are good educators, who have additional leadership skill set to go in leadership. If someone's constantly saying because their own security puts something down, then you're not going to attract the people who need to be in there. And that's a problem. Or you get some people who only want to do it because they want to look good in a tie, wear some high heels, whatever else. You know what I'm saying? It's beyond that. So that's the negative part. I'm gonna try to go to a more positive part now. And this the part I'm saying right now relates to that. Like we have to be honest about what it really is. It's a when you are a when you're a building leader, that's like running the executive director of a nonprofit, a big one, or NGO, whatever else. When you're a district leader, it's a bigger nonprofit. You're the executive director, of the CEO of that organization. And what we put, what we expect our executive directors and CEOs, we don't kind of do that same courtesy to like building and district leaders when it's actually the same skill set and that's the way it should be. That's what it really is. It's about like you have the leadership skill set and you've taught for a certain amount of years, so you have the experience and wisdom. So my next part, the positive part, I think to make it better is, you know, um, no matter how smart you are, you can't rush experience and wisdom. So I think we need more controls about that. No one should be a building leader unless you taught like a certain amount of years. I'll throw out like say 10, maybe 8 or 9. No one should really be in central office unless you've been a principal or assistant principal before. That matters. Experience and wisdom matters. Me at 50 now, how I handle things versus when I was like 35 is totally different. That was the
Yes.
experience and wisdom that did that. And then because I've taught for 14 years and I've done all these building leaderships like that, people can't, pull something on you. I was like, I taught. What are you? I know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm saying? And I'm leading you. So that's where I think, as a, we don't talk about enough. That when we talk about like education leadership, that we should be talking about that more and how to improve the profession because you also because people are they don't want to seem vulnerable. Some people have imposter syndrome. y- Teachers they have a union to kind of help them or whatever else to kind of help them air grievances. But principals don't do that. It happens like at a happy hour or at some PD. But no one's really checking in on principals and district leaders about uh, what's the, how could a job be improved, and they'll get feedback like just be more organized, just communicate better. It's like these generic things. If you communicate better, that wouldn't be a problem. What do you mean by that? They got a newsletter. I saw them, so they just say things, and no one's really talking about what supports can we give school and building leaders, I mean, school and district leaders so their job is more manageable and they can truly be that executive that's running.
Say, I don't know in a group of your peers, or the people that are supposed to be providing supports or suggestions don't know either, and don't know where to go to get that. And that's like the one of the I can't remember what, a couple weeks ago, posted something about like somebody was we were talking having a conversation about what are the most durable skills now and then into the future. And I said one of them is absolutely self-directed learning, right? Because you're gonna have to go find some things, because whether people are don't know, people are too busy, you can't get access to it. Like in the private world, same thing. Because I always want to know why are we doing this? Why does this work like this? How come we wouldn't do this? That this is the goal. This doesn't seem to match. Like all those things, but you can't just get answers to that, right? Like you don't know. And trying to figure out the why, well, I have to go ask other people, or I have to go like watch. This is how a company goes from public to private, and this is what venture capital and what they, because I had no clue. Um, and I think it's a little bit of both on the education side. Just you're gonna have to go find it, and unfortunately, probably not be waiting on others to provide it for you, because I see the same gaps that you're describing everywhere. Not just Texas, not anywhere specific, but across the entire ecosystem of education. And it seems like they're widening because everything is moving so fast now, right? Administrators are younger, coming into the roles younger, and there's such churn. Like it's only exacerbating the whole that gap of leadership.
Yeah,
So I
and
think we're seeing the same things.
yeah, you'll get someone like, and what happens is, and I've seen this where like I caught like there is a something about starting something too early. You know what I'm saying? Like and where like um I use teaching. If you have 10 years of successful teaching experience, no one can take that away from you. First of all, you can always go back and teach if you want to. You had experience, and then that inform like I always tell people all the time, I'll get some leadership when people want to as a mentor or like interview. I always tell them, yes, I learned some leadership stuff and some courses, some degrees, things like that. But I always fall back on my teaching when I'm making decisions and thinking about stuff. It always comes back from that. Not from like some article I read. It comes back to like me just being like teaching being part of my core of who I am as a human and as an educator. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, man, I can't thank you enough. I feel like we need to do a part 2 and 3, because I got 35 other things to ask you. Gave me some perspective that I hadn't heard before, which I'm gonna take, and I like to take things, and then I just I have to like marinate on them a little bit and think about it, and then like really look into, all right, how am I seeing it, and then um, to get wrap my mind around some of the points, because I
Yeah.
had not heard those before, particularly the going back to more of a handwriting and those basic things that we give students. Most everybody is like, oh, what do we need cursive for? What do we need homework for? So
Yeah.
I'm gonna, but your points make sense, and the way that you laid them out, they track. So is it making me go back and look to, all right, I need to probably dive back into the research, right? Because say a lot of things and take a lot of things anecdotally, but
Yeah.
I used to be just like, well, say all you want, but let's go look and see. And you get out of practice of doing that because everything's moving so fast. But man, I couldn't thank you enough. If you're in the Massachusetts area and you want a great school, just like, hey, if Torrance is a part of a district, you definitely think through things, and I think you're working for the best interest of students and your staff, because you're very candid, and usually we're very guarded, right? So it tells me like you are who you are, and your students are at the front of your why you do what you do. So I can't thank you enough for joining the show, and hopefully we'll have some time to do a part 2 sometime.
Yeah. I would love it. I was great being here. Thank you, Rick, for inviting me and hosting me today.
Yep,
So
you got it. And please like, subscribe, and share if you enjoy the content. And we will see you next time on Solve for X.
all right.
Thanks for joining us on Solve for X. Please follow, like, and subscribe for more episodes. And until next time, keep asking the right questions and solving for X.